I'm just going to spin a little bit more on the exordium. This is the wheel I was using for last week's episode, but and I was spinning from Maris as well, but I've just got a small bat here that I'm going to spin this week, and hopefully I will be able to blend this with what I had from the last two episodes out of the same fleece. I don't have a quill on the spindle this week, and I just noticed that before I started taping. So that means I'm going to have to wind this fiber off when I get ready and wind it onto a quill before I can ply it or do whatever I'm going to do with it. So it'll be a little labor intensive, but it's not worth going inside and grabbing a quill. So I'm still using the 11:1 ratio. And you'll see that will allow me to spin quite a bit of yarn pretty quickly. If you pay attention to the spindle, you'll see how quickly it becomes covered in brown, and that's a good gauge, because after you get it loaded up, as you start adding thickness, it's not as easy to tell how much you put on, because the tighter you wind it on, the more compressed it becomes. So you can have a fatter cop on a quill that has less yarn, yardage, and weight than on a thinner cop that has more yarn, yardage, and weight, just because of the way you've wound it on. And the same is true with the flyer wheels, but that's determined by your tensioner. So like your Scotch or your Irish tensioner, it decides how tightly packed on that yarn is. But if you're using a double drive, it kind of puts it on at a uniform rate the whole time, because it's actually pulling at a different rate than it's twisting, and all of that's set from the beginning. That's how a double drive works. For every so many treadles you do, it pulls an inch of yarn on the bobbin, and then for every so many treadles you do, it adds X amount of twist to that yarn. And I should say that that's not an even rate. The fatter your cop gets, or the fatter your bobbin, the more full your bobbin gets with the yarn you're spinning on a double drive, the quicker it pulls on, which is why double drive wheels automatically have differing amounts of twist on the beginning of your bobbin than they do on the end of your bobbin. There's less twist at the end of your bobbin than at the beginning, and it's proportionately so. The most twisted your yarn will be is at the beginning of the bobbin, and the least twisted your yarn will be is at the end of the bobbin, and it goes at a set rate the whole way, determined by how full the bobbin is getting. And that's because the fuller the bobbin gets, that means the more yarn it takes to make it one revolution around that bobbin. And the more yarn it takes, that means the faster it's pulling on. And the faster it's pulling on means the less twist is being added in it before it's pulled on. So in the beginning, when all you've got your 3/4 shaft in the middle of the bobbin, there's not that much pull on your yarn, and it's letting quite a bit of twist in the single before it's actually winding it on the bobbin. But in the end, you're having to pull on so much yarn to make it around that big bobbin that's full of yarn that there's hardly any twist going into your fiber. So if you're a person who's kind of stuck with a double drive, the best thing you can do is only fill your bobbins about half full, because the effect is exaggerated less the less fiber you put on a bobbin. So if you can deal with going with shorter skeins of yarn, that will keep it from making as big a difference. Another thing that you can do is you ply the beginning of one single along with the end of the other single, and so that when you end, you're at the end of the first single and at the beginning of the second single, because what you'll have is a tightly wound single in the beginning with a loosely wound single, and then in the middle you'll have two medium wound singles, and then in the end you'll have a loosely wound single with a tightly wound single. So that's your best bet at getting a uniform yarn when you're using a double drive. But more often than not, people will just, once they know that there's a difference of that nature, they'll either switch to a tensioner, in which they can adjust the uptake and the twist, or go to a spindle where they don't even have to worry about any of that. Got to go back to work tomorrow, and then I've got to go to my guild meeting tomorrow night and spin on this wheel. So I have a full day of more spinning, which isn't bad. But that doesn't leave me too much time tonight to get everything taken care of to be gone all day tomorrow. I was thinking about making this episode a drop spindle episode, but the wheel is too tempting. I succumbed to the temptation and I broke out the wheel, because it's so relaxing to just sit and spin through a vat of fibers so quickly, and I just really enjoy it. Especially when it's so nice out here, it's great to be able to just relax and have the repetitive and rhythmic nature of the wheel kind of lull you into some sort of, I don't know. So I mentioned that my ratio is 11 to 1. My drive wheel only has a circumference of 36 inches. And then that's because each side of the octagon is only 4.5 inches across. So 4.5 inches times 8 is 36. And then I have on the spindle, my spindle is only an inch across, and it's an octagon. I'm not sure what that comes out to as the sides. I could figure it, but I don't have that handy. But I do know then the circumference is 3.3137. So if you just divide 3.3137 by 8, that'll give you what the sides were. But if I wasn't using such a small drive wheel, the ratio would be even greater, because that is a pretty small circumference, or pretty short circumference on a spindle pulley. Like the Doduck has a 48-inch circumference, so if you can imagine, it's like 16 to 1 ratio when using this spindle pulley and that drive wheel. And then the Porter wheel has a 44-inch, so it falls in between the two. This is coming along nicely. I think I'm going to probably try to knit this into a cowl. I'm really liking the feeling of this wool, and I like the weight of it. It's got good grip and twist. So yeah, I think it'll make a nice cowl. Maybe a chunky weight cowl, maybe something finer. Cows are really big right now. When we went to Europe in 2010, cows were everywhere, but they weren't worn as much in the U.S. People were still wearing scarves in the Parisian, neck wrap. Anyways, over there, people were either wearing cows or they were wearing their scarves as cows. And a lot in Ireland, quite a bit in England. And it really made me want a scarf when I came home that I could wear as a cow. And I'm pleased that that has become the trend here now, 5 years later. It was pretty big last year, but to be in the general public now where people have given up the frilly novelty scarves and things, and now they're moving towards actual knitted cowls. It's nice to see that. See people wearing something that takes a bit more craftsmanship and stuff, and allows us to make some nicer stuff for our friends and family, because not everybody's chasing these trendy things. Like we really didn't care for the build stocking caps. Anytime you're dealing with handcrafts like knitting or crochet, when you put something like that on it, it didn't look too bad, but the only problem was if it wasn't popular the coming year, you just had to throw that hat out. It wasn't like it was going to blend in or whatever. I mean, the bill itself was going to date that trend so specifically. So when it was popular. And, the funny thing is you could still get by wearing a stocking cap while people were wearing caps with bills. But then, when the bills were out of style, then, you could still wear the stocking cap that you were wearing while people were wearing billed hats. But you couldn't wear the billed hats anymore. And if one of your favorite hats were the billed hats, you were just out of luck. So we just crossed our fingers and hoped that nobody we knew asked us to make them one of those hats, because we love making hats and scarves and cowls for people, but a little bit of us dies inside when they ask for something a little too trendy for our taste. We really kind of like the classic and timeless nature of knits and how they transcend the fads. So, that's what's handy about what we do, is that we can kind of blend in with what's now, even while making something that has, been in fashion for 100 years. And it always helps if it's practical as well. I would much rather knit somebody a hat that is functional and, warm and whatnot, even if it is going to be trendy. As long as I know that it's utilitarian, I will kind of cave sometimes and be like, sure, I'll do a ear flap hat for you, because those aren't too bad and they're not going to be outdated as quickly. And we do like the mohawk hats. That's pretty nice. Although I don't see them going the way of the dodo as quickly, like, build stocking caps. It will be interesting to see if trapper hats ever kind of make the resurgence that ear flap hats have. So a trapper hat is, it's got the two ear flaps and then the flap in front that folds up, kind of like Gomer Fudd. And I've seen a couple companies trying to move towards those after having the ear flap hats, but I haven't really seen them make a great push into that area. And I'd like to know if that's where we're headed after the ear flap hats. Well, that's all the fiber I had, and we put a good amount on here, and knowing that I have to wind it all off by hand, I don't want it to get too cumbersome. So that's probably it for this week, and I hope you're enjoying it. Just let me know if there's anything you'd like to see. I'll try to get drop spindle in one of these episodes.